Jerome Powell just made a shocking announcement that will unlock $2.1 trillion towards Bitcoin. And with all of this, the billionaire, the Giga Chad, Michael Saylor, has even said that this is going to take Bitcoin to skyrocket in flight, as it's absolutely going to take off. Now, before we get into everything that this could mean for Bitcoin, let's hear it from Jerome Powell himself and hear what he had to say about the banks and Bitcoin.
Banks are the regulated entities that are in the digital assets or crypto space.
So our view is that banks get to decide who their customers are. That's not our decision. And so banks are free to provide banking services to the crypto industry, to crypto companies. And banks are also free to conduct crypto activities as long as they do so in a way that is, protective of safety and soundness.
So they are now allowed to custody, do whatever they'd like towards Bitcoin, right? So what does that mean? That means that the $21.2 trillion market of banks in the United States is now unleashed towards Bitcoin. They could do essentially whatever they want, whether it's custody, whether it's ETFs, whether it's Bitcoin loans based on their ETF holdings or even their custodial holdings, which we're seeing gain massive amounts of popularity. And this banking industry in the United States is absolutely massive. So unlocking just a portion of this big giant industry towards Bitcoin can make it just absolutely take off. In fact, if all of this banking money went straight to Bitcoin, it would be now bigger than gold, right? But the reality is that the Fed is saying that it will no longer consider Bitcoin as a reputational risk towards Bitcoin or towards banks. It ends the back door that many use to cut off legal industries like Bitcoin, because a lot of Bitcoin companies have been getting debanked. If you had Bitcoin in your name, a lot of companies had difficulties getting a bank account. Well, now, not so fast, my friend. That seems to be the end of those days where it seems like we are going to start to get to a place where Bitcoin is more accepted. Bitcoin is more of a commonplace. There's not going to be any of the legal handcuffs that they're going to put on. So the Fed saying that banks are free to provide services to the crypto industry and free to conduct crypto activities is absolutely massive, strictly because it just opens up a lot of doors for Bitcoin companies to conduct their services, but also for retail to also now buy Bitcoin and have it within their bank, right? So despite what many of you guys say, right? I mean, I'm the same way. I'm a big proponent of self-custody, and I don't think that you should allow these banks, especially when we're going to get into Jamie Dimon here in a second, allow these guys to hold your Bitcoin because, well, let's just face it, they've been super bearish on the fact of Bitcoin and they've been very against a lot of its properties. But the reality is they see that the dollar sign's there, right? They see that these Powell's testimony indicates regulatory alignment across major financial bodies and insights, right? So they see that this is a big target for dollars, right? That they can essentially get a lot of money in. They think that this is going to be a big way to attract more customers. The list goes on here, right? They think that this is going to be something that, is going to be beneficial for them. They removed the reputational risk from its bank supervision framework on June 23rd. The decision aligns with the Fed's Federal Deposit or FDIC Corporation and the Office on Contemporary Currency, which made similar revisions earlier this year. Together, the three regulators that oversee every federally insured depository institution in the United States are now Bitcoin friendly. But I mentioned this at the beginning. This is big, not just for the regulatory aspect, but because of what Michael Saylor has come out and said about banks. Now let's listen in.
Last 6 months have been tremendous. All of the fundamental planets have aligned. Bitcoin's been acknowledged as the one digital commodity in the world by the administration. The banking regulators have given a green light to bank Bitcoin. The account.
So you hear that, right? So in his second point there, and I think it's a very big one that we need to focus on, Michael Saylor saying, hey, you know what? We have governments coming in, but the banking industry is absolutely massive. Now, banks being more friendly encourages more innovation because now you don't have to worry about not being able to get a bank account. But also, on the flip side of things, you can now utilize banks potentially to hold Bitcoin services. Now, look, like I said before, I'm not saying that you guys should go and do that and jump full force and letting these guys buy your Bitcoin because Jamie Dimon has come out and even said like that Bitcoin is going to be a fraud in 10 years and that he doesn't see that it's going to be around anymore. And this isn't a recent conversation. Like this tweet's here from today. He said all this during a private meeting, at least allegedly. That's the rumor floating around the internet. But the reality is Jamie Dimon has been very, very negative towards Bitcoin for quite some time. So he's conducted one of the biggest Bitcoin backflips on the planet, where he's now letting his clients buy Bitcoin. But he's always been very wary of it, right? The significance of his reluctant Bitcoin surrender is actually huge. So big that they're literally writing a full article on how big Jamie Dimon's backflip is, because he is one of the more influential people in the banking industry. Let's just face it. I mean, I'll be honest with you, right? Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan Chase, one of the biggest banks in the world, the biggest bank in the United States, the biggest bank outside of China. So he's been skeptical of Bitcoin. And in 2017, he'd say he would fire any employee who traded Bitcoin for being stupid and called that a fraud. He called cryptocurrency a pet rock. Last year, he said that it was just for money laundering and all these other things. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? But the reality is what he's seeing here, right? Is like Michael Saylor predicting that fair regulation, proper accounting, and big banks custodying Bitcoin could drive up Bitcoin 100x. And I think it's interesting when you see Michael Saylor saying that, because we've had banks start to dip their toe in, right? JP Morgan's playing around with some dumb blockchain. And then we've also had Wells Fargo come out and seeing the rise and actually, acknowledging the companies holding Bitcoin, and even coming out and saying that, the biggest surprise of 2025 is not just Bitcoin, coming in. It's Bitcoin tapping into that 300 trillion global bond market. So, with the way that strategy has been conducting, the way that strategy has been going through and utilizing all of these different traditional financial tools, it's really kept a very close eye, or kept strategy at the top of investors' mind, because now they have all these different options, all of these different payment structures, all of these different ways to invest their money in Bitcoin. We've got banks, Spanish banking giants, BBVA, breaking the mold with bold wealth strategy shifts here fairly recently in June 18th, where they're advising its wealthy private bank clients to allocate 3 to 7% of their portfolio in cryptocurrencies. The list goes on and on and on. But I think the unique aspect of all of this is what we went over the other day. Michael Saylor raising his Bitcoin forecast to 21 million, right? Raising this to 21 million in 21 years, which means by 2046, is higher than he had it last year. And what were some of the reasons that he cited when he went through all this? He said the governments, Donald Trump essentially taking the handcuffs off. He mentioned the Bitcoin corporations. He mentioned the strategic reserve. The banking industry was not, without handcuffs at that time. We could all foresee that potentially in the future, but Michael Saylor not even mentioning that, and that's why he's becoming more bullish, is another reason why I think that this is absolutely massive. He's hinted at, hey, you know what? If banks can custody Bitcoin, it's going to be absolutely huge. It's going to drive up Bitcoin 100x. I mean, he's even said it in interviews, and this is a long, 30-minute clip that I'm not going to play the whole thing for you guys. But regardless, it's what he's coming out and saying, right? He sees these giant market shares. He sees how big the banking industry is. The Bitcoin forecast of 21 million now did not include having banking in it. And Fannie Mae is now allowing Bitcoin holdings to count towards mortgage approvals. So Bitcoin is now being recognized as a true asset, which has not been the case for quite some time, right? Like if you had a most majority of your net worth in Bitcoin prior to this, well, one, unfortunately, you have to disclose all of that. But two, banks were not being able to lend on that. Now we're getting more products and services around the banking industry that are more friendly towards Bitcoin. We've got a lot of different types of services. We've got mortgages now potentially with Bitcoin and all of these other things, right? So, but the reality is even though we're going over the custody aspect of this and how Jerome Powell has essentially come out and said, hey, banks are free to provide banking services to crypto industries and are free to conduct crypto activities. Although that's very broad, I think that it just shows the reality of what we're living in right now. We're seeing a lot of banks and a lot of people, a lot of attention around this space. And so the banking industry does not want to lose any money around this. But like I said, I really am a big proponent of self custody. So I think that you guys should always hold your own Bitcoin. Don't trust it with banks. You see Jamie Dimon coming out and saying this: Bitcoin is a fraud. In 10 years from now, it will be closed down. But then what does he do? He lets his bank clients buy Bitcoin. It's like, watch what they do, but not what they say. So if you thought that, hey, Bitcoin's going to be dead in 10 years, why would you let your clients do it? One, it's either your clients demand it, or two, you're lying to everybody in the public. And, I think it's potentially a little bit of both here. And so I think he's one of the bigger frauds in the market. But regardless, I think you guys should always hold Bitcoin in cold storage. And that's why I've partnered with my friends over at the Bitcoin Well. So if you go to bitcoinwell.com/greencandle, you will see a sign up area. If you sign up, you will get 500 wishing well tokens. Then you make your first transaction 500. So that's 2 chances for you to win 1,000 sats or 1 million sats, excuse me. And then on top of it, if you just hit subscribe with that bell notification, you guys can come to the Green Candle live streams and potentially win some sats as well. All you got to do is get your Lightning wallet out, get ready to scan this, and boom, 517 sats. That could be some generational wealth here in the future. At the very least, that could be a cup of coffee here very soon. Now, on top of that, if you missed that opportunity, you could go to bitcoinwell.com/greencandle. You could sign up with your email there to win those 500 wishing well tokens. And if you got 50K smackers, scroll on down, go to the infinite and book a call with them. And if this all seems very daunting, you're like, what the hell do? I have no idea what's going on. Go to the funeral director, the death of fiat. Go to thebitcoinway.com/greencandle. You'll see me here in this great, I'm looking sharp there. I know you guys always say I'm looking like a funeral director, but hey, go to there and then you can book a free 30-minute consultation. They got 25 years of cybersecurity experience. They've got all the experience in the Bitcoin space. And why do I say to go to them? Because you need to get your Bitcoin away from these custodians. We've got a literal $21.2 trillion banking industry in the United States. But what they do, look, asset distribution, they will rehypothecate your Bitcoin if you give it to them. They're going to try to offer things like yield. They're going to do all of these crazy things. And you need to be wary of these new players. The reality is, even though you trust your banks to hold your cash, even though you trust your banks with your banking account and these informations, banks get hacked continually. The dollar amounts are strictly number on a screen. With Bitcoin's finality, it adds an extra risk, especially when there's these new players coming in, right? So Down Under Blues is saying, what are other bank managers saying? Always focus on the corrupt JD of JPM. So Wells Fargo is saying about Bitcoin, tapping into the bond market. And that's a big portion of what they're seeing. They're talking about, hey, this $300 trillion global bond market with Strike and Strife is the most unsung heroes. The other banking industries are really talking about the ETFs and everything else, but not a lot of them obviously are talking about as publicly about Bitcoin as Jamie Dimon. That's why I usually focus on him, because he's the only one kind of publicly coming out and saying all these different things. I think majority of these other banks, they're kind of doing a wait and see approach. They're not necessarily going, hey, we want to go all in on Bitcoin. Of course, we saw what happened with Silicon Valley Bank not too long ago. So I think a lot of these other banks are, really, really close, are really close to potentially starting to come out and say something about it, but they're just not as vocal, right? We've got some of these other big players. We have another billionaire today, and maybe we'll get into that here later on, come out and say that he needs to have Bitcoin and he feels like it. But Hattori Hanzo is saying that they will need to offer higher interest yields, and I agree. That's what worries me with these banks, is that everybody is so used to putting their bank in a savings account. Oh, my money is safe in a bank, all this and that. Well, they're going to rehypothecate your Bitcoin if you deposit it here, and they don't have that experience of dealing with the market volatility of Bitcoin. So the bank services, they're custodying, anything that they do with dollars. So custodying loans, all of that. They are not necessarily going to offer all of these services right away, but they're not there just yet. And as Shane is saying, the money printer, it's going to be coming here pretty quick. I would not be surprised if this is something that is going to start to take off here, where they're going to start to conduct quantitative easing. Because we've had basically, two different Fed chairs talking about cutting interest rates. And they are essentially coming out and saying that, that they should be cutting. But Jerome Powell has been essentially, staying pretty strong with his actual stance on everything. He says that, they've held the interest rates fresh after Trump attacks. Trump has come out and said, hey, we need to cut interest rates. We need to do it so quickly, you wouldn't even believe it. And, that Powell is always super, super late. Now, I don't think that we should cut interest rates. In my personal opinion, I don't think we're out of the woods just yet. But the reality is that Bitcoin is that hedge no matter where you are in this cycle, right? I mean, we got Bitcoin creeping up to that new all-time high, right around 107 we're coming at the time of this. As Daddy O is saying in the chat, we are so early, and I couldn't agree more. That we're just, the earliest of the early still. We still have people doubting Bitcoin. We still have, these little market pumps coming in and out. But the reality is we're not to the finality of Bitcoin just yet. We're starting to get to, where we're going, which is, that 21 million that Michael Saylor said. But we're still getting Bitcoin kind of some resistance there, right? Because Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, these guys, for the loans, they're looking at Bitcoin and saying, hey, you know what? We should be looking at it as something that, is a part of what a part of somebody's assets. We've got basically, GameStop coming out and saying, hey, GameStop now holding 9.1 billion in cash, but just 500 in Bitcoin, right? We've got Anthony Pompliano and his new company now raising up and being one of the largest holders in Bitcoin right off the jump. Pomp and his crew passed GameStop. They now hold more Bitcoin than GameStop. They did that quickly, just with one swoop and buy. So it's absolutely crazy that we're seeing all of these bears come out of the woodwork, when the reality is that we're seeing a lot of bullish news here, right? A lot of these companies are coming up and raising money to buy Bitcoin, but we haven't seen much just yet. We're seeing billionaires talk about, hey, we want to buy Bitcoin, and we think that it's almost, billionaires are coming out and saying it's too late. I feel like I don't have enough Bitcoin, right? So I think that these things are going to keep coming in, and it's going to be extremely bullish here going forward. But the reality is that we should not be holding Bitcoin on exchanges. We should not be trusting these banks with your Bitcoin. Why? Well, like I lined out here, Jamie Dimon, there's extreme amounts of custody risks, especially when somebody is so negative towards Bitcoin. Why is he negative? You got to ask yourself these questions, right? Because if he's so negative, he thinks Bitcoin's going to be gone. Why are you offering it to your clients? Well, you're offering it to clients either one, to make money, or two, you just want to be a part of the rug pull before the rug pull actually occurs. So I don't think Jamie Dimon in the end really realizes what's going on here with Bitcoin and the true power of Bitcoin that we're seeing. But guys, thank you guys so much for joining me. Make sure you smoke that like Cheech and Chong. You hit that subscribe button. You tell a friend to come out here, because guys, we are so early, and I'm going to be covering all of this for you guys as this develops more and more. So please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and I'll catch you guys all at the next one.